What can you do with all this information now? Well, we need to see a little bit more about how we are affecting things and how everything we do has an impact, and everything climate does has an impact on us as well, especially on an old man like me and Aji, the grandma, right? So this chapter is called Calamity and Disaster, in which we will read why there is a flag at the bottom of the Arctic Ocean. Did you know that there is a flag at the bottom of the Arctic Ocean? Indicator of human greed and ignorance sometimes. Which islands are at the risk of going glug, which means they will go underwater? Why Sandy? Hurricane Sandy, if you haven't heard about it. Why wasn't it welcome in New York? How your smartphone, maybe you have one, maybe you don't have one, your parents have, your brother has, sister has, and so on. How your smartphone is making people thirsty in Bolivia. You bought a smartphone from somewhere, a shop in your country, in your town, and somebody in Bolivia is losing water for your smartphone. Why Brussels will never break the world record for rain sitting in Belgium? What the world's most dangerous animal is doing in Netherlands? What to do with your grandma and grandpa in a heat wave? You're asking me, Grandpa, what should I do for you and grandma in a heat wave? How weather experts can save chocolate. What's happening to chocolate? How is climate change affecting chocolate production, coffee, tea, everything? Why there is not a book about water wars? Well, actually there are many books about water wars, but not written for children, and it's a bit more complicated topic on how what water war means and how they can be fought or have they been fought and what may cause them and so on. So we'll see a little bit about, but in short we will look at the consequences of climate change. We looked at the consequences of climate change in terms of melting poles and sea level rise and storms and floods and droughts and so on. Now we'll look at the consequences of those consequences. So we are in a loop. We burn fossil fuel, affect greenhouse gases, the warming affects climate and it affects us, and then that affects the climate again. So the good news, of course, is I have good news and bad news. The bad news is that there isn't much good news when it comes to climate change right now. So let's just begin with a bit of good news that we do have. Just a little bit. Climate change isn't much of a problem for Earth. It's mainly a problem for us people and other living creatures on the planet. Earth has already been through so many climate changes. It will survive this one too. It has gone through ice ages and disappearing ice ages and snowball Earth episodes and so on. When there are no more people around to cut down forests, the excess of CO2 will naturally be taken out of the air by trees, by the ocean and the soils. The climate will recover and another species will probably come along that can rule the roost on Earth after us. CO2 is good for trees and other plants, and so it's good for agriculture. Hurrah! Plants use CO2 to grow, so more CO2 results in more growth. Some farmers also make use of CO2 to make their plants grow even better. It's too bad that CO2 has so many disadvantages with the energy business. So you can read about every other page of this book. You can see that CO2 has been bad so far. It's a villain. And there is more good news though. Lots of people are now happy about the higher temperatures in cold Sweden. It's warmer. This is particularly true in places where it's a bit chilly now, like Siberia. Colder countries are moving towards warmer climate now too, which means people from places like Canada won't have to travel so far to find good weather during their winter vacations. Nice. And in countries where it's really cold now, a warmer climate could even save lives, as sometimes it's so cold that people actually die. So you can see various types of glasses of hot and not so hot and nice and so on. So many regions that are now frozen will thaw in the future if warming continues. This has a positive side too. For example, more Greenlanders are starting to grow fruits and vegetables like the Vikings did, and they are now able to take more valuable rocks and metals from the ground that is emerging from under the ice. Fishers are happy with the mackerel and other fish that are slowly making their way closer to the higher latitudes because the waters are getting warmer. Half of the world is rubbing its hands at the thought of North Pole region thawing. Why is that? Russia, Norway, Denmark, Canada and the United States are all keen to annex, take over some as much of the area as possible. In 2007, a Russian submarine even ventured to the bottom of the Arctic to plant a Russian flag there. The North Pole is so much in demand because there is less and less ice and snow covering it. That means a route to sail from Europe to Japan and China can be open. It was open a little bit during this century. It's a lot shorter than the normal route through the Suez Canal in Egypt, but what's even more important is that oil and natural gas that must be in the ground there. It's worth billions. Remember a long time ago when the dinosaurs were running around, it was very warm and it was no sea ice here, no Greenland glacier, lots of forests and phytoplankton here, and all of them would have been buried and converted into fossil fuel. So there is Canada, Greenland, which belongs to Denmark. There is Norway, Russia, and the Arctic Ocean is sitting there and saying, what is happening? So there's good news, and climate change not a problem for the earth, and extra income for Greenland, and North Pole is full of resources like oil and gas. Of course, we have to worry about CO2 also for trees and plants. It'll be nice and warm, more and more mammoths and mummies and people think, right? So plus people think, what, something disappeared there. Anyway, the thawing of the ice and earth also increasingly exposes our history. More and more mammoths are coming out of the depths of frozen Russian soil. This is fascinating for scientists. In 1991, two mountaineers in the Alps found a man who must have died there 5,300 years ago in the cold. The ice mummy was given the name Otzi, O-T-Z-I, after the valley where he was found, the Ötztal. The body was well preserved in the cold, together with his clothes, weapons and tools. Otzi provided a lot of information about the Stone Age. Archaeologists expect that a lot more old remains will emerge from beneath the ice. Just like when the lake levels in the Lake Powell in western US dropped, many good and bad things got exposed. Maybe the best news is that the climate change is teaching us people not to treat the world so recklessly. They are thinking more about where their food and energy comes from, so they don't buy apples from Chile or electricity from coal-fired power stations. Companies have seen this happening too. They are starting to use less coal and more wind turbines. This results in less pollution and less dependence on fossil fuels. But don't start celebrating yet. We still haven't heard the bad news. So here is Otzi the Iceman from plus minus 3300 Common Era, plus minus 3055 Common Era. So just don't worry about the numbers. It was found to be dated back to 5,300 years ago, sorry, and you can see all the kind of information we can get buried, like we saw before, at the bottom of the seas and so on and so forth. Of course, sea level rise also means disappearing islands and brings lots of issues. So here we are talking about eating unseasonal fruit. So you could be sitting in a winter and eating mango because it's coming from the southern hemisphere, or eating blueberries in the wrong season because it's coming from another hemisphere, and vegetables. And it's a good thing that you can find all these things when you wish to eat them, but to grow them, to fly them, to sell them, to package them, to transport them and so on is a lot of energy and lot of emissions, and that's what we are always talking about. So for the future, what do you want to worry about? Do you want to stop eating meat and stopping unseasonal fruits and only eat food from the local market and so on and so forth? That may not be possible. So we have to worry about everything. We have to start increasing renewable energies like solar and wind and waves and nuclear and hydrogen and so on. And we have to produce things without burning so many things. So the cell phone you have, the smartphone, doesn't have to have so much carbon footprint, doesn't have to use so much water, and doesn't have to deplete water in Bolivia to give you your smartphone, and so on and so forth. So everything is related to everything else. So sacrificing everything and living like a hermit is obviously not a solution. You want to imagine a future that is full of nice things, and you are dreaming about going to Mars and Moon without polluting the atmosphere here, and we'll see that that may be possible if we are smart in doing things and inventing things and producing renewable energy and doing everything without emitting so much carbon. Okay, so we'll come back and continue the discussion on what are we going to talk about. We're going to talk about disappearing islands and the sea level rise. Okay, see you.